This week and over the next few weeks, you're going to be analyzing legal cases within the context that you've learned in this class. So I want to go over a brief overview of how to think about this as you begin reading the cases this week and completing your assignments. So specifically what you want to be looking for when you're reading, and I'd highlight by saying this is a little bit different than you might do in a different class, right? You might have a different approach to reading. In general, when you read, we do something called reading comprehension tests, right? We want to see how well have you remembered what you read, are you able to recall facts and recite the basic concepts, and then we also want to know how well do you understand those concepts. Are you able to explain them and describe them in a way that is consistent with what you read. That's the same, we're still doing that here, but now you're kind of looking for specific things. You're trying to remember and understand very specific things, not necessarily the entire reading. And the first thing you really want to start with, because the Supreme Court cannot hear cases unless they involve a case in controversy, so there must be some issue at hand, is to identify the injustice or the controversy and try to be as specific as you possibly can. This is no more than a sentence or two, right? I don't need you to copy and paste from the case. What I need you to do is be able to explain it. Can you describe the injustice so I have a good idea that you understand it? You also want to then identify the rights claim. And this is usually pretty clear. But what is a little bit harder to do is to refer to the basis. So the person is making a claim based in rights, right? They're saying I have a right to do whatever it is they're saying. But what's its basis? How are they defining that right? Why do they think they have that right? How does the court, what do the judges say about that right? Then you want to think about this in the context that we've been really studying this whole time, which is admitting and understanding that we live in a society of unequal relations. And so people are treated differently, and so there's no equality before the law. That's a nice ideal, but it's not realistic. It doesn't happen in real life. And so we want to be able to make sense of that in these cases. Who's got the power, who's relatively powerless, and how does that affect their claim to rights? You also need to then go a little bit deeper, spend some time reflecting, and compare this to your own standpoint. In what ways are you similar to the person who's making the rights claim? In what ways are you different from the person who's making the rights claim? Be clear about that and make sure you're explaining it the best that you can. Then after you read each of the cases, and you've kind of gone through this practice over and over and over again, you want to reflect again and think, okay, what's the general rule? What did I learn about these cases as they go together, as if they were one group or if they had happened all at the same time? This is what you want to be focusing on as you go through these readings. Now, you're going to probably struggle on the first attempt because this is a brand new thing for you, and teaching constitutional law for over 10 years now. This is a lot of legal vocabulary. It's information that might be contradictory or different than what you thought you knew, and one other thing is that the cases are different than what the internet and media describe, so you want to keep that in mind. You're reading something now with a legal scholar mind instead of popular culture, and so it's going to be different, and so it's going to take you some time to get out of the old habit and into the new habit. So the way you're being graded here is, from left to right. If you're just not able to do it, then you're going to get a D, and this tells you that you need to revise your thinking, right? So as you go through the next assignments, you need to try a different strategy, or you need to reach out to me so we can work on this together. What you're going to show me is that you're not able to do it, right? That you're not reading critically and you're not able to analyze. And then you're going to kind of refer to these ideas that come from media or come from popular culture, which is that judges are neutral and they just make up things as they go, which is incorrect, right? This should be different. Now that you've learned about constitutional law, you should now have a good way of analyzing the cases. So most of you won't be in that category. Most of you will be somewhere between reading the cases for comprehension, but you're just not quite able to do the analysis yet. It might take a few times. And then you might be able to start explaining how judges are both empowered and constrained. So you're starting to see that there's this kind of give and take process that they're going through. They can't do whatever they want, but they are able to do some things, right? They're able to interpret. They're able to use different philosophies. They're able to affect people differently. You will probably also start to talk about abstract situations, right? Overgeneralizations that don't really have any scientific evidence behind them, but that are making sense to you logically. And so that shows me you're getting there, you're working it out, but it's beyond your own lived experience. So you're forgetting to compare to your own standpoint. You're also going to probably start to recognize some precedent, right? This is a legal vocabulary word that you were introduced to in the first section. And you're going to start to understand that this applies to the common law, and this is how judicial review really works within constitutional law. And you're going to start to see the arguments and these things changing as judges are interacting with these arguments. But you might not be to the level of legal reasoning yet, right? You might still be struggling to get to that level. You're just starting to learn these things, you're working it out, and you're getting there, but you haven't quite got it yet. You may get there, and I hope you do, right? If you take your time and you try to apply these principles that I'm giving to you now, but to really show me that you've got it, you'll be able to apply this within the context. You'll kind of move from thinking like a lawyer to thinking like a legal scholar, right? You'll be able to kind of see the big picture and look at it systemically. So my goal is that, you're not going to be perfect on the first time. It's impossible. It's never going to happen, so don't worry about that. You're going to struggle through and try to get used to this new way of reading cases. And so you've had about half the semester to prepare for this, and you've been learning a different context, which is going to be helpful as you do this. And then you'll get better as you go through each of the sections, right? And probably you'll get better as you go through each of the cases. And then after this week, after I've got at least 10 students to complete the assignment, I'll put together a video that kind of goes over the greatest hits and some of the near misses, right? Kind of what you're doing and what you need to work on in the sections that follow. And this will help you be able to revise the way you're thinking, or it might help you get a little bit closer to your goal, or it might remind you of some of the things that you're making mistakes on. Now, so far, this is what you've learned, right? You've learned that law is more than just a set of ideal rules. You've learned that law also includes legislation, judicial precedent, customs, values, and historical experience, as well as the way that people go through the process. You've learned that judges use different philosophies to interpret cases and controversies. You've learned that unequal social relations are evidenced by discrimination against race, gender, and economic class, and this is called intersectional justice. You've learned that systemic injustice through domination leads to resistance, right? So the two things are connected to one another. They're integrated, and they are both forms of legality. You've learned that these experiences with legality then lead to different narratives about what people think and believe the law is in very specific situations. And so that's before the law. The law is some kind of abstract, mystical place that solves everyone's problems and is equal. Law that is with the law, right? That's a situation in which people use the law to their advantage. In that case, it's a tool that will help the powerful but probably hurt the powerless. But also as a resource that's up against the law, people feeling like they've got a situation in which they've got to fight back, they've got to resist, and they usually do that in the language of rights. This then leads to the idea that social movements, when lots of people come together, are constituted as resistance to unequal social relations. As people become aware of these discriminations and because of the systemic injustice, they begin to come together to try to use whatever powers that they have in reaction to the resistance to try to make a change. And so now you're ready to apply these things to the learning. And ignore the numbers over here. That's something that automatically happened in the, it's not really 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. But these are the things that are really crucial that you've learned so far that are going to apply. And so the first set of cases you're going to look at involve race and participatory politics. In other words, how the political sphere, how society, how unequal social relations have used politics to exclude people based on their race from participating. What you're going to do is go through each of these cases with the method I've described. In the assignment, it's going to ask you very specifically to identify these things. And then you're going to think about, after you're done reading all these cases, you're going to think about what was the precedent? What was the individual rules of each of the case, what was the reasoning that the judge used, how does this relate to judicial review, and what does it say about the common law system, that these rules are happening over time. You might want to feel like there's been progress in this area, but I think reading these cases will challenge your ideas, right? Will challenge popular culture ideas. If there has been any progress, you're going to have to try to identify in the language of the court. How did judges make sense of these cases? So in the way of thinking about this from a learning point of view is you're moving beyond the remembering and understanding, and now you're applying what you've learned so far. And that's going to show up in your ability to analyze. So are you able to take pieces of all this learning, take it and apply it to a new situation, and then draw some conclusions? Are you going to be able to show what the differences and similarities are? Are you going to be able to see these patterns? Are you going to be able to start thinking in legal reasoning skills? So you'll be able to show me this if you can apply the framework that I've just gone over with you to these cases, right? So if you're very clear and specific in your answers, I'll see that you're able to do this. You'll also start to see how historical structural controversies, including racism, problems within criminal justice, issues with race, class, and gender, and modern challenges like global and environmental issues affect how the state tries to operate. You always want to think about this tension between the state, the government trying to keep itself going, right? Trying to do what it needs to do, so the people within that group are all trying to keep their power and keep the system going the way that benefits them. But then this tension of people who are saying, well, the system isn't working for me, and so don't I have a right to freedom? Don't I have a right to equality, right? And so there's this tension going back and forth between these two large groups of people, those who are benefiting and those who are being harmed. You want to be able to explain this is the operating world that judges are trying to make their decisions within, right? This is their kind of empowering and constraining. They can't go too far one way or the other without people losing belief in the system of law. After this section, you're going to move on to criminal justice, and you're going to see the difficulty of balancing interests, largely between police and society. Then you're going to see intersectional injustice and rights and see how that has developed, specifically with sexual reproduction, those kind of rights there. And then also the economic and global challenges that are really up and coming, that have been with us for a while, but are becoming more and more prevalent in legal cases. And putting it all together, that means you'll be able to remember the cases, you'll understand them, you'll apply the context to these cases, and then you'll analyze. And in some ways you'll start to evaluate. You'll be able to start justifying your own standpoint, you'll be justifying your own opinions, and starting to get to this level where you're seeing that maybe if you were a judge, you might operate within a similar or a different kind of point of view. And so you'll start maybe referencing some of the philosophies that we've talked about. And finally, looking way to the future, after you've gone through each of these sets at the end of the month, what you'll be doing is going to the discussion board, and then you're going to be showing me somewhere, hopefully, between getting there and you got it, right? That you're going to be showing me that you've really, after practicing this over and over and over again, you totally know how to do it, and you're ready to kind of move on, and you'll show me this through the discussion board, and it'll be a good time for you all to see each other's answers and think about kind of where you are at relative to one another. So I hope this has been useful. This is just kind of an introduction to get you going. And again, you might struggle at first, but you're going to practice, and hopefully you'll get better as you go through. So be patient and just do your best.